All right. If we can. Okay, take. All right, test. All right, here we go as you grab your seat. With Dwayne Durst, Executive Presbyter of the Northeast Region, listening to me, here's my get your attention statement. I do believe in the AG interpretation of imminent return of Jesus. So, everybody okay? However, there's an element of our extreme belief of imminent return of Jesus, Jesus is coming soon, that has affected some ministers in not preparing for the future. We cannot allow our strong belief, good belief, hopefully true, I mean, it is true, but to stop us from planning as if he's not. I remind you, we've been preaching this, it's been for 2,000 years. And for whatever reason, he's delayed. Again, we believe it's to reach the world. This could be one of the most important aspects of this meeting is to make sure we do things. Everything's important. We've got to get the pastoral compensation correct, and we have to get this piece of it correct. I'm absolutely convinced that Pastor Dwayne, we could talk all day if we wanted to about how many ministers truly are missing the will of God on the other side of not leaving when they're supposed to because of financial pressures. And I would tell every board, if we're not taking care of them now, and again, if we're not coming up with a plan right now to help this next generation, we're just going to continue to have these same problems. It was a problem when I was a kid with my dad, and it's a problem 20, 30, 40 years later. This is crucial. And I have never disagreed with you in my life. Well, that's not true. But I will disagree with one aspect of what you said earlier today. And you said something to the effect that if the church does it without a matching, that's great. I don't think it's great. If I was a church board, and I'll tell you my story, I wouldn't match a guy who wouldn't put something in himself. I would mandate. Matter of fact, here's what I did in my last pastorate. I'd been there for a while, and God had blessed, so you get away with a little bit extra. And I called all of my staff together. The board approved it. We went through all the process. And I said, the board has agreed to do a 5% match. And I said, so I'm going to check. Because you'll be fired if you don't for stupidity. This is crucial. And Kyle is genius in this area. Get your pencil sharp. Kyle, come on up there and help us to get this retirement piece correct.
All right, we're going to have some fun with this one. All right, I got a lot to cover, and I'm going to go through some of these really fast because I want to spend more of the time on the topics that I'm hearing mostly about, which is the investing side. And I did promise you some stock market predictions today that you can take to the bank. So we're going to do some retirement fundamentals. So if we continue on to the next slide, 2 slides, one and then one more. All right, 4 ways to influence your retirement success. I've broken this down to as simple as possible. It's simple in the points, but it's difficult in the execution, all right? So if you go on to the next slide, the first way is when you start. I would argue that this is probably one of the most important points that we're going to make today. I am so excited about Rick Ross being the general treasurer of the Assemblies of God. I've worked with him for over 20 years. Not only have I watched what he knows and how he operates himself, but I've also had the privilege of looking at some of the pastors that he has mentored, the young ones over the years, that he has really sat down more so than most people do and say, you need to do this and you need to get started as soon as you can, and where those pastors are today, that type of impact. The start time is the great equalizer of the ability of not having enough to contribute. So what I mean by that is a lot of people, if you advance it to the next slide, will use the excuse, I don't have enough right now. I may have $50, but that's not enough. I'm going to wait until I have $150 or $200, something more significant to start saving for retirement. You guys have all seen these types of illustrations, but I can't, it never gets old because as Einstein said, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. So if you look at this diagram, it takes two people, a male and a female, and the female is the smarter of the two, which we know is statistically accurate. The female is 25 years old, and she saves $5,000 a year for only 10 years. So she only does it for 10 years times 5,000 is $50,000. And then she stops, but the money is invested and it continues to grow. By the time she's 65, she's accumulated about $785,000. This is assuming an average rate of return of 8%. Now the guy comes along. When he was 25, he had just gotten married, he had kids, he had a lot of other priorities in life, so he waited. But now at age 35, he saves the same amount every year, and he does it every year for 30 years. It's $150,000. He invests it in the same thing, and he has about $170,000 less than she did because she started earlier. She took advantage of time. This is something I'm teaching my 15-year-old twins right now, is anything you do, especially at 15 and 16. I started at 16 when I got my first job putting money away in an IRA because I had seen these illustrations, and it blew my mind at that young of an age that I could possibly have $1 million. That motivated me to put it in. Now, let me tell you, much like everything else in life, dieting, exercise, saving follows the same thing. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of patience and discipline. But I'm actually working with my son right now to show him, instead of focusing on the million, because that's really far off and usually dismotivates a lot of people, if you can focus from 0 to 100,000. Once you hit 100,000, the compounding effect to get to 200, to 500, to $1 million, because now that money is really starting to work for you while you're continually putting money in. So focus on how do I get from 0 to 100 the fastest possible, and then from there you'll start seeing results even faster. So getting started. Again, pastors, church board members, people in the room, but you're also thinking about other people on staff. Even if they're not pastors, maybe you have lay employees, secretaries, admin assistants. The same principle applies to them. They need to get started. You, again, may not have the resources to put money in for them, but you can offer them the ability to set up and do their own contributions to the plan. So if you advance it to the next slide, Ben Franklin said, money makes money, and the money that money makes money. I mean, really think about that. While I'm working, which I plan to do as long as I can, I am earning an income, and I'm saving part of that income. And while that income, and I'm saving that and investing it, and while I continue to do that, that money's making money. And that money that was made on that is also making money. It's a pretty cool. It's like having 2 or 3 jobs, but I only have one. I'm getting the income from 2 or 3, but I'm only having to spend the time to do one. That's what investing does. So if you go on to the next slide. So we talked about when you start. The next one is how much you contribute. This one is limited based on what your discretionary income is. I wish I could tell you, if you advance to the next slide, I put up the 2025 contribution limits to a 403B plan, which for this year, the amount that you can defer from your pay, if you're under 50, is up to $23,500. I wish you all had an extra $23,500 laying around, because I'll get those calls and somebody says, that's all I can contribute? I have more. And I always have to tell those people, that's a good problem to have. It's a good problem to have, because most people don't anywhere come close to $23,500. But how much you can contribute, you do what you can now, and then as you go on, you gradually increase it. I would rather you do that starting with a smaller dollar amount than doing nothing and waiting until you have something that you think is more significant. But again, that's limited. We don't necessarily have unlimited means for how much you can contribute. If you go on to the next slide, this is my favorite part that we're going to talk about today, how you invest. This is that part that becomes very daunting and paralyzing to most people when you talk to them about investing, the stock market, their menu of investment options with all these fancy names that nobody knows. We're going to break this down today to a very easy to understand concept. So if you'd advance it. And the concept of being a successful investor is emotions. It's not how much you watch CNBC. It's not how often you read Wall Street Journal, which I do both of those every day. It's your feelings. My wife says I don't have feelings. And I tell her, when it comes to money, I have a lot of feelings. Pastors, you have a lot of feelings when it comes to money. Because the calls that I get when the market goes down, sometimes I wish I could have them recorded. I have been sworn at, cussed out, blamed. I mean, oftentimes when we have new employees come on to AG Financial on my team, I will tell them, you're getting a peek behind the curtain here. And if you're not strong and rooted in your faith, you got to be very careful, because you're going to see somebody on Sunday morning, and then you're going to see a different person during the week when they pick up that phone and give you a call. And again, I get it. We're all human beings, and money's a very powerful thing. But what I've learned over these 25 years, or since I started investing at 14, is it's not necessarily how much you know, it's how you feel that makes or breaks you. So here's the stock market prediction that I'm going to tell you can take to the bank. The market goes up and the market goes down. We will have another recession, probably multiple recessions. We will have another market correction, even though after today we're toying with a correction right now. We will have upswings in the market. This is what the market does and what it has always done. So stop getting worked up about what happens when you log into your account and look at your balance. So this graph shows, if you can see it, a range of emotions based on the market. So as we're going up, this is the last 2 years. And right now, I think we're right here about anxiety with all the headlines and the market now approaching the 10% negative off of its highs. So you go down, fear, depression, panic, capitulation, despondency, and then guess what? We become optimistic again. We start getting hope, and this happens over and over and over. But if you notice, what I think is important is at the very top of a market is the point of maximum risk. And at the bottom of the market is the point of maximum opportunity. The stock market is a marketplace that whenever it goes on sale, nobody wants to buy anything. As Warren Buffett says, when people are fearful, be greedy. And when people are greedy, be fearful. So as the market has had a nice run up these last couple years, and I have enjoyed logging in and looking at that balance go up and up, I also know that the day is coming when it's going to start going down. And when the market goes down, what do most people do? Sell, get me out. This is not what I signed up for, right? And it's that reaction, it's that emotion that actually does more harm to your portfolio than what the market's doing. It's selling out at lows and waiting to buy in at highs, which is what most people do. And instead of looking at, again, don't like seeing my balance go down, but now at age 47, I have yet another opportunity that the market's gonna pull back 10, 15, 20, who knows what percentage, and I can move more money in for my next 20-year run. So if you advance it to the next slide, my father always told me this growing up, not related to stocks, but I quote it to my kids, and I never realized the connection of how this quote applies to also investing. If you'd move the slide forward. My dad said, I can't help the way I feel, but I can help the way I think and act. I hated hearing that as a kid because emotions, when I was mad and I was angry, I didn't need that logic of, well, in this moment, what am I going to do and how am I going to react out of anger or out of kindness, you know? But the same thing applies to the stock market. Right now, when I log into my balance, which folks, I do way too frequently, but that's my line of work. So I have feelings. I am human. I do this for a living. I still have feelings. But what I do is different than most people. When I hear most of our people calling saying, get me out, is usually when I'm getting in. And when you all are getting in, when I get 75-year-olds going from 100% fixed to 80% stocks because they have a fear of missing out, I know we've got a problem. So think about your emotions. Go on to the next slide. This is probably the most powerful slide I can show you, is a stock chart of the S&P 500 over the 25 years that I've worked at AG Financial. Now, you look at me and you say, he sure looks a lot older than 47, and that's because the 3 major recessions that we've encountered have put a lot of wrinkles on my face. My daughter is afraid of these because she thinks it means I'm angry, but it's also a shock or surprise wrinkle. But this is the stock market. 3 major recessions in the last 24 years. One of those recessions, called the Great Recession, if you recall from 2008, 2009, was the second worst recession since the Great Depression. So we have lived through a lot in the last 25 years. We've had a terrorist attack on U.S. soil. We've had wars. We've had the pandemic, right? This, by the way, is COVID. Doesn't look as bad when you zoom out versus when we saw it actually occur. That was a 30% drop in 5 weeks. Plus, you were hearing that the entire world was shutting down. Just all this stuff that you never had heard about before. And that particular year in 2020, when the market tanked 30% in 5 weeks, the market still ended up the year positive. But what were most people doing? Selling. So look, the market does what the market does. There's a lot of ups and downs in the middle, but listen to this statistic. Every time the market has gone down, 100% of the time, it has always gone to a new high. Think about that. 100% of the time that it's dropped, it has always gone back up and up higher. The length of time in between is what varies. Sometimes it only takes a few months. Sometimes it could take over a year or 2 years. I just heard a statistic the other day. They went back to early 40s and they analyzed every bear market that we've had. And just so you know, these terms, recession, correction, bear, a bear market is defined as about a 20% drop from a peak. They looked at every bear market we've had since the early 40s. The average loss during the bear market during that time period was 32%. That's pretty steep. The average length of the bear market since the early 40s was 11 months. But when we're in it, folks, it'll never end. This is the beginning of the end. The whole world's going down. This is what we hear all the time. The blood moon, the fiscal cliff, all these things that are happening. Which, mind you, the blood moon, I'm not a theologian, but when I had the pastors calling me saying the whole market's going to go down, I thought, well, this is a buying opportunity. You're looking at it the wrong way. So now I gave you the stats on the bear market. They also went and looked at all the bull markets during that period of time since the early 40s. The average return during the bull market was 150%. The average duration of a bull market was 4.3 years. I mean, think about that. The market does what the market does. Stop trying to be smarter than the market. I'm still a student of the market, and I've been doing this since I was 14. The market always teaches me a lesson. And the lesson is, the longer you're in it, the better chances you are of having success. The moment your feelings start to, twist things and make you want to do or react a certain way, the moment you're probably going to make a bad decision. If you go to the next slide, this is a representation of that chart I just showed you, but in a form where you could actually see the annual returns of the S&P 500. I can push it forward one. There we go. So this again stacks from 2000 to 2024. It's very interesting to see these years here, 31, 18, 28. In 2022, we had an 18% drop and then a 26 and a 25% rate of return. But this is 24 years, excuse me. Think about this. How many reds do you see? 6 years, although I would even argue that this one's pretty flat right here. But 6 out of that time, that's a 75% positive rate. 75% positive rate in that time period. So when you're looking at all this, and I always tell people, when you call me and you want to talk and say, everything's going wrong, everything's bad, I need to get out, I'm not even going to stop. I'm not even going to talk you out of it. I'm done. You do what you do because you have to sleep at night with your money. But I tell you how many times I've watched people do this just to find that the market has gone right back up. And the Great Recession is probably the best of all of those. When the banking, the subprime mortgage, this was a global catastrophe, not just here in the U.S. And everybody was thinking, wow. If you can go back one slide to the chart again, there was one point I wanted to make on that based on the calls that I get. Can you reverse it back one? Yeah. And again, don't get mad at me. I want you to think during this time period who was in the White House. Both parties. So when you call me during the election year, trying to make a prediction of what you think is going to happen and how that's going to just absolutely decimate your portfolio, keep in mind, this is 2000 all the way to 2025, and you know who was in the White House. Now, I'm not saying don't have political views, don't vote your political views, just don't get too worked up in your political views with your long-term investment statement. Because again, I have that happen all the time, every election cycle, all the time. And it's not even that they know. It's not even that they waited till election night to see who got elected. It's the speculation of who they think is going to get elected. And that sometimes that market move in just the night of the election and the next day is so massive, they don't even have time to get back in if they made a wrong prediction. So if you advance it a couple slides. One more. This is a quote from Peter Lynch, who is probably one of the greatest investors next to Warren Buffett, who worked for Fidelity, managed their Magellan Fund. He says, far more money's been lost by investors preparing for corrections or trying to anticipate corrections than has actually been lost in corrections. And these are from people that are way smarter than me. But they analyze this, they watch this. It's those emotions that cause the performance failure, not what the market does. One more slide. I love to show this illustration if you can see it. But this is a chart that shows you if you invested $10,000 in the S&P 500, and we looked at 20-year periods starting in January of 2003 and ending in December of 2022. Okay, so that is 20 years. There are roughly 251 trading days in a calendar year. 251 trading days times 20 years is about 5,020 days. If you left that 10,000 in the entire time, it would be worth about $64,000. If you fiddled with it and you missed 10 of the best days in that 5,000 day span, your performance would have been about 29,000. If you fiddled with it and you missed 60 of the best days in that 5,000 day span, your performance was your money would be worth about $4,000. Isn't that crazy? Now, what really blows my mind is down here at the bottom, it shows you when the 10 best days in the market were during that time period. 7 of the 10 were in 2008, the Great Recession. You remember the news, you remember the companies that have been around, Lehman Brothers, everybody's closing down, subprime mortgages, global banking catastrophe. And look, not only did they occur in 2008, October 13th, 11% in one day, the market went up. And look, folks, October 28th, Just a few days later, it went up another 10.8%. The other 3 out of the 10 days that weren't in 2008 were in 2020 during the pandemic. The market can drop fast, but it can also go up fast. You can get out on the down, but it is very hard to determine when to get back in. Very hard. So if you move on to the next slide, just a few points I want to make on this is time and personality. When you're investing, okay, investing to me is something that's longer than 5 years. If you're putting money in the stock market, we need to have a time frame of at least 5 or more years. If you're 10, 15, 20 years, 30 years out, even better. But it looks at time, but also your personality, because every one of you has a unique personality. Some of you may look at all this as opportunity when the market goes down, which is great, but I can tell you statistically that's few. Most of you panic, get concerned. That's the average. So you have to take into consideration your personality. Folks, you need to invest within a risk box, a tolerance box that is yours, not mine. I do not want you leaving this session today saying, this guy just showed me that the market is always going to go up, so I'm going to call him and move my entire portfolio into 100% stocks. That's not what I'm getting at today. My point is define what works for you. When the market goes down, if that freaks you out, then guess what? You shouldn't be heavily invested in stocks. That's okay. The moment you go outside of your box, the moment your emotions will most likely drive you to make a bad decision. If you stay within your tolerance box, you'll be able to ride out those ups and downs and hold steady. So you need to determine what that tolerance is for you. Risk and reward. You don't get reward without taking risk. I always get the calls of saying, Kyle, I want as much interest as possible, much earnings, but I don't want any risk. Or an annuity guy just told me, and I'm going to just tell you, if you do sell annuities, I have nothing against that. I used to be a licensed life insurance agent to sell annuities, so I can speak from personal experience. The tagline that we would use to sell you an annuity is all the upside of the market without the downside. It's pretty good, huh? All the upside of the market, no downside. I hope that triggers a red flag to you, right? That there's a problem there. Risk and reward, they're a relationship. If you want complete safety, put it in your bank account, FDIC insured. You'll get, 3% today, 2 or 3% on a CDs? You know, actually not bad considering where we were a few years ago when interest rates were all below 1% or 0. But risk-free, lower return, higher risk, higher possible return. Setting reasonable expectations. You heard me talk about this morning. Expectations are very critical. I was sharing with you that 12% stat from Dave Ramsey. If the average return for the stock market is 12%, let's just say, but you're in a 60-40 mix, meaning 60% stocks, should you expect 12%? You only have 60% in the market, right? If the market, all of the market did 12%, you should only capture about 60% of that, right? You got to have the right expectations. And part of those expectations, I am telling you today, is expect the market to go down. It will continue to happen. I promise you, the market will go down and it will go up. And then the last one, unrealized gains and losses. This is typically an accounting term, but it also applies to investments. When you pull up your statements and you see the negatives or the parentheses showing you a loss, that is unrealized. It's not real. It's on paper. Much like if you see huge gains and you're starting to think, hey, I'm pretty good at this. It's not real. It's only real when you sell at a higher price than you bought or at a lower price than you bought. I always use this illustration because we all usually have a home or a place that we live. If you own a home and all of a sudden in your area, all the home values drop by $50,000, but you have a great job, your kids are in a great school, would you sell your house? Why? Because you don't need to, right? And you think that if I just keep it, maybe the value will come back up, right? It's the same thing with retirement accounts. You don't need to be selling. You don't need to be fiddling with it unless you're retiring. But most of you aren't retiring. And by the way, as you're getting older and closer to that retirement age, you probably should be changing your allocation to less and less risk, right? The risk that I'm willing to take in my 40s is probably not the risk I'm going to want to take when I'm 65. So you need to be sure you're looking at that. But unrealized gains and losses, it's not real. It's on paper. So the moment you sell it at a lower price because of your emotions, now it's become a real loss. The moment you move it out when the market goes up, now it's become a real gain. If you move on to the next slide, and this is my cautionary slide, go ahead to the next one, of what I encounter with all of my clients over the years, and I'm trying to do it in the nicest way possible, but what I hear and the actions that I see, it sometimes just really makes me say, are you asking the question, is it too good to be true? Are you approaching these things with a healthy level of skepticism? I had a pastor call me once, and he said that I've got a guy in my church, right? Because you all have people on your board or in your church that work in the financial field. And hey, look, they have your best interest. They want to help you out, and I have no problems with that. But there's certain phrases or things that I hear that makes me say, red flag, okay? One of them is, hey, pastor, what did you make last year? Oh, I made, 6%. Oh, I could have, if had you had that money invested with me, we could have gotten you 12%. That's a red flag to me, folks. I can go backwards and look at last year and tell you how you should have had your portfolio to get more. Anybody can do that. Hindsight's 20/20, right? The other one, I had a pastor say, Kyle, I moved all my money to this guy. That's great. Does he go to your church? No. It's just somebody who other people recommended. I said, okay, well, what did he have that you liked? Well, he drove a Mercedes. I'm not kidding you, right? That was the qualifying for him. He didn't understand what the guy said. He didn't know, it was all beyond what he understood. But because he presented himself as if he was a wealthy person, that's all that he needed to do to make his decision. Just be careful. If another red flag I have that I've been seeing happening is if I come in and I start name dropping. If I start saying, Dr. Hurst or Doug Clay or Rick Ross invest with me, so you should invest with me. I don't like that either. Because number one, I don't need to tell you what these people are doing. That's nothing. And just because they do something doesn't mean you should do it. Just because I can use people of influence that I know to help make you feel like if what they do it, I should definitely do whatever they're doing. No, that's not always the case. And then social comparison. This is one that I'm really big on now that we live in this world of social media. Looking online all the time at where they go on vacations and what they're doing. And I know how big their church is. It's similar to the size of my church, so how come we can't do this? We should be able to afford this type of car or this size of a house because other people are doing that. Let me just make this point. Wealth is what you don't see. Wealth is what you don't see. Okay? That's very important. If I'm going around showcasing everything, maybe I have money, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I have wealth. Wealth is what you don't see. And then chasing returns, popular trends, keeping this in mind. When you're chasing something, you're behind it. And usually with investments, being behind something is not the optimal place to be. This has manifested itself in many forms and fashions over the years. Right now, the biggest one, and just understand what I'm saying, I'm careful in how I say it, is cryptocurrency. And I'm not saying that cryptocurrency is a bad investment or it's not legit. Please don't mistake what I'm saying. But what it is feeding in people is the get-rich-quick mentality. That this thing moves at a fast speed. And I'm hearing all these amazing stories of these people that put in $10,000 and now they're multi-millionaires. And that appeals to people on a human level, just like the lottery does. So if you're invested in crypto, be careful. I am invested in crypto this much, because if I lost it all, it won't cause any problems with paying the bills. Could I put more in? Maybe, but here's the thing. I don't understand it. I've read about it, I've watched videos about it, and to this day, I still don't get it. But I did know that 10 years ago, they said that we would be able to walk into any Walmart and pay for things with a Bitcoin, and we still don't have that ability to do that. And I was also told as a child in the 80s that by the year 2000, we'd have flying cars. We don't have that either. So be careful about this chasing the popular trends, what's being out there. It appeals, but just keep yourself in check. Slow and steady wins the race. Be disciplined. Little bit adding up over a long time. That's the way you've got to look at it. If you go on to the next slide, I've only got 2 minutes. I'm going to just address the advice versus education. I'm a former registered investment advisor, had my Series 65, and have since let it go. I have a lot of people come up and say, can you advise me? Tell me what to do. No, I can't. And nor do I. Advice comes for a fee. It's another fee you have to pay. So some people, you may have $500,000, $1 million, and it makes sense to pay that fee. For a lot of people just starting out, or $20,000, $50,000, why do you need more fees? I told you what the market's going to do. What you need is education. Give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. So be careful about this need or desire that I need to go out there and get advice. And most of the time as a registered investment advisor that I would help you take a risk tolerance quiz, tell you here's your recommended allocation. The moment the market went the other way, what did you do? You threw that advice out and said, my emotions are more important. I have a bad feeling about this. I'm going to get out of it. So be careful about the advice versus education. And then the last, if you go on to the next slide, the last point that I had here in our 4 ways to have a good retirement success is how long you work, right? And as I told you earlier, the longer you work, the better, the healthier that you are. Go ahead and move it on to the next slide. I want you to work, especially in the ministry. But I also want you to have an idea in that head of what that older version of you is. This is me. I said it to my wife, and I said, you're welcome. But you need to visualize, what am I going to do? What do I want to do in retirement? You know, some people, especially with that calling, you're going to transition, but you still want to do something. I want you to have the financial freedom to do whatever God calls you to do and not have to worry about that paycheck part. And that's why God wants you to be a good steward today with the limited resources that we have so that you can have that flexibility in the future. If you advance it to the next slide is my contact information. I've got my cell phone on there that you can call me, text me. Actually, I prefer email over text because I do have to document all of my correspondence, and texting is difficult to text myself and email what you say to me and then have to record it all. So if you feel free to contact me. I am here in our team of retirement consultants and all of our consultants at AG Financial. We're here as a resource for you, okay? Regardless if you have somebody that you work with, I still think we've got some benefits that are good to explore. If we're not all of your portfolio, at least a component of your portfolio. But the nice thing is we don't get paid on commission. And that was important to me, being a person that loved investing since I was a kid, and not knowing about AG Financial even existing. I wanted to be able to help out people without having to worry about selling somebody something. And so that is all we do, is we are a resource, we are a sounding board. Whether you agree or disagree, whether you want to do something or you don't do something, we're here for you. We're here for you. I've got business cards too if you need to take my contact information, but I've exhausted my time. Thank you very much.
Give us, stand and stretch, give us 3 minutes. We're going to have a panel ready to go.